Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right in the back? Yeah. Sit. Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Aidan. I'm from Chainsafe, and I love Ethereum, and I hope you all do too. Today, we're going to have an incredible panel on a really exciting EIP that hopefully will get you excited about the future of Ethereum or not, and would love to hear why not. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves because they'll do a much better job than I will. We can start here.
Yeah, sure. My name is Ahmad Bita. I'm a core developer working on the Nethermind execution client.
Yeah, I'm Mark Holt. I'm a core developer working on the Erigon team. My main focus on that team is working with Polygon to optimize their L2.
My name is Mark, and I contribute to the Optimism collective.
Sounds like some alcoholic anonymous. My name is Marius, and I'm working at the Geth team. Not on 4444, but I'm jumping in for Matt, who's unfortunately cannot be here today.
And thanks for that. Cool. So for those who aren't familiar, EIP-4444, or as the cool kids are calling it, 44s, is something that has been talked about for a decent amount of time. But for those of you who aren't familiar, and those of you who are kind of at a high level familiar with it, we're going to kind of explain it and hopefully get you onboarded to the exciting world of 44s. So please, Ahmed, do you mind?
Sure. So right now, if we look at the node types that are around for execution clients, we kind of have like two nodes. We have the archive node that contains the full history of the chain plus the full state of the chain since Genesis. And that's basically used usually for explorers, etc. And there is the full node, which has the full history of the chain, except the state only can exist only for the last 128 blocks in case any reorgs happen, which is not kind of that possible with the current mainnet implementation. And with 4.4s, it enables these full nodes, if they choose to prune a history of all these blocks. So we're talking about bodies at the seats of these blocks, even headers, to prune them away, saving a lot of disk storage. And this allows users who are trying to sync a full node for usage with validator, running a validator node, for example, or just connecting their wallet into their own local node. They can accomplish that without having a lot of requirement for storage. That's basically the gist of the AI here.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And another question for you. What has been the biggest pushback so far with 4.4s?
Well, some people think that if we start pruning these old historical blocks, we might start losing some of the history of the chain, and it could be risky, etc. There are other risks, like if we don't have the full history of the chain, how can we trust that whatever we're syncing is actually following the canonical chain, etc., etc. There are, of course, solutions to those, which my colleagues probably could answer. But one of the other also pushbacks is some L2s right now need the full history of the chain to resync their nodes. So they utilize an L1 node to sync their L2 node fully. But I think they are in the works of also mitigating that. So there is a lot of solutions going to answer these problems.
Awesome. Thank you.
I also have some. I'm also like, I started out being very much in favor of 4.4, and I am still, but I also see some more like drawbacks. One of the drawbacks that we see is that like, if nodes start dropping history, or if like some clients start dropping history, then everyone will rely on the remaining clients for syncing the history, and this will make the clients that still have the history, that still maintain the history, their jobs way harder, way more complicated. And we saw something similar with SnapSync, where I think both Nethermind and Bisu synced SnapSync, but they never served it. I think you guys implemented it now.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's in the works. But basically, if you're syncing a node right now with SnapSync, the only way it's possible is because there's a lot of Geth nodes that serve it, and it's the same. Like, it will probably be similar with history. That if we don't do this in like a coordinated manner, it's just like some clients implement it and others don't. And we, being Geth, is probably the client who will drop it at the latest point possible. But the thing is then, like, the Geth node is not competitive with other nodes anymore, because our node is 850 gigabytes, while another node is, I think you can roughly drop 300 to 400 gigabytes of history and receipts. So it's like 450 versus 850 gigabytes, and that's especially if we look like 5 years out, this will be the difference between like a 2 terabyte disk and 1 terabyte disk. I think at that point, clients that retain the history will not be competitive anymore with other clients.
Thank you. And the next question is for the Marks. What technical challenges are still left to solve? Either of you can kick it off.
Yeah, so if I start, because it sort of comes on from the thing that you were saying, is I think if you look at Erigon, which is primarily an archive node, I mean, we're never going to drop the data, but you can see from the way that our implementation has gone, I mean, you can interpret 4.4s as don't distribute data, or as don't distribute data across the P2P network. And I think the other thing that is worth looking at in terms of Erigon and Polygon is Polygon's kind of probably where Ethereum will be in a certain amount of time, in that it's at 50 million blocks and it has larger block sizes. So when you're talking about 1 terabyte, I mean, I think the typical size for Polygon main chain is around 8, right? So there's actually, you can see there's going to be a massively significant issue to do with storage of data history. And as the chains become more performant and do more transactions, the history problem is only going to get worse. So it's almost like there's the beginning of a split between what the execution client does and what the execution process does, and how you manage the history post that. Because it's clear from the ecosystem around history that's got value in its own right, basically. So I think a lot of what Erigon's actually doing is the development we've done over the last couple of years is dealing with the problem of history. And if you look at where we've got to, typically you start an Erigon node and get history. You don't get it from Dev P2P. We have a BitTorrent client that distributes pretty much up to the latest history. So I think one of the things from our point of view is, as this becomes more of a talked about public issue, the question for us becomes, how much of that technology is just part of the node, and how much of it is part of the wider community. And I think those are the challenges that begin out of this proposal. I mean, they're not actually in 4.4s, they're probably in the bit at the bottom that says, out of scope, effectively. But I think 4.4s is the beginning of that conversation.
Thank you. Mark, do you want to add to that, please?
Yeah, totally. So I think one of the ideas is that with 4.4s, you no longer can work with the assumption that the RPC is going to have all of the data that you need. And a lot of applications are built using this assumption. So if we break that assumption, we need to figure out a solution that basically can unbreak applications, right? Because we never want to ship upgrades to Ethereum or like to L2s where it breaks existing applications. Like, we want to try our best to not do that. So there's this idea of basically kind of creating this shim that you can send your RPC request to this little shim, and it'll figure out which node to route the request to. And then you can have like a bunch of different nodes that serve data from a particular time frame. And this could kind of mimic the way the RPC works today, so that developers don't need to think about, changing what RPC they're talking to. They can just point to a single RPC, and then it'll figure out, where to get the data from. And, at Optimism, the OP stack, right, it has an assumption that it can pull in all the historical transactions and all the historical receipts to like build the L2 state. So if there wasn't, some sort of server like this, we'd have to, redesign our architecture to work differently. And, also with OP mainnet, we have, before Bedrock is like our modern roll-up architecture. We have this part of OP mainnet that is legacy. And we kind of have hit this problem already where, users want legacy data, but legacy data doesn't necessarily work with the Bedrock architecture. So we kind of built this service, we call it a daisy chain, where basically, when a user sends a request into, the node can know whether or not to, forward the request to a different node or just look up the data locally. And so L2s are starting to hit this problem. So I think that, as 4.4's, progresses, it would definitely be like a good point to collaborate between L2s and L1.
Oh, I would like to add something to that was if a node chooses to not prune historical data, then they can pull this historical blocks and transactions from an Era 1 archive or from BitTorrent like Erigon does, and they will still be able to serve it in RPC. It's like that tool. It can be configurable. You can configure, like 4.4 does not specify that the node has to stop saving or serving RPC, but it does specify that the node has to stop serving on the P2P network, which is, I don't think, is being utilized by L2s. L2s are utilized in RPCs, correct?
Yes.
I think the other thing is, if you look at the way the Erigon data's gone, what we've ended up doing is sharding by time. So we've got, we're debating whether it's 100,000 blocks or 500,000 blocks, but effectively, once you do that, you've actually got a whole series of blocks of data. And I think this concept of having RPC that parallelizes is, you find the node that's got 500,000 blocks you want, and that doesn't all need to be contained in your the thing that you hit to do the service doesn't need to hold all the data. It needs to know how to find the data. So effectively, what you've got is a sharded model. I mean, I think again, the question is who's incentivized to provide the shards? But I don't think anybody necessarily has to provide the whole chain, essentially, because it's kind of it's a piece of scaling that kind of naturally falls out of the data.
Thanks. And Mark, just to follow up on that, so we can, really spell it out plainly for people and what they can expect, especially application developers that maybe aren't following, core protocol developments as closely as some of the people on the stage. What can those application developers expect? Specifically ones that have something deployed, are, have regular users. What will kind of the next version of their application architecture look like with this new change?
Totally. So for applications that are running their own node infrastructure, they'll likely need to update, the way that they run their nodes. Applications also should rethink a little bit about how they use the blockchain, because, you should think more of the blockchain as this time-stamping service where the network is able to come to consensus over the state at a particular time. and instead of thinking of it like a database, because it's just unrealistic to think of a blockchain like a database, because these blockchains need to be around for years and years and years. And we just need to like basically come to agreement on things like a bulletin board and figure out other solutions to store the data that's like better at storing data. So yeah, ideally we can come up with solutions where it doesn't break your application, but I do think that we'll need to like rethink a little bit about how applications are designed when it comes to using events or using the chain as a database.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of applications just like querying events from receipts, and so we need to maintain the receipts. And the receipts are growing exponentially because everyone is like dumping their data that they want their dApp to use into a receipt, emitting events for those unfamiliar with how the node works. And this is just a lot of data that we currently need to store. And I think you said something about like 20 gigabytes per month or something.
We're growing at around 20 gigabytes per month right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just block bodies and receipts.
Yeah, and so you can see like it's used quite extensively, and we need to make sure. I think application developers need to find a different way of storing the data. Events are fine, in my opinion, if you listen to them, which means like you're following the chain and you see, okay, an event is happening, and you say, okay, it's happened at this block, and now I'm doing stuff in my own database. But if you're using your node as a database and say, okay, I want to filter all of the events that happened for my smart contract since the beginning of time, then this is not the use case that will be supported in the future anymore, I think. There are some things that we can do better with regards to this, with like Bloom filters, so you don't have to like filter through every receipts, but in the end, like it's a lot of data, and there's a lot of false positives. So if you're an application developer, you need to start thinking about how are you using the blockchain right now, because it will change.
So this might actually be like a little bit of a hot take, but I do think that there's a world where we can like remove the concept of events completely from Ethereum. And it really struck me when I heard this concept of shadow events, where you can kind of just run another client that does all the execution, and you can just add in your own kind of custom events arbitrarily and kind of have your own indexer. And I do think that this is going to be like the future of the way that the blockchain works, because like why would you pay for events to be part of consensus when you could remove all the events from consensus and just run this other process that does the execution, and you can arbitrarily insert free event indexing anywhere.
You can actually do this right now already with traces. I think most of the clients support arbitrary JSON traces. At least we do JSON tracing and Go tracing. And so you can write your own tracer to do exactly this, and then you don't need any events. You just write the tracer in a way that sees, okay, this function was called, and now I'm going to emit this. The JSON tracer is emitting this event into my database, and that's it. And I don't need any events anymore, and I don't need to pay for any events anymore. And I think, application developers need to work on that.
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, we have a slightly different view, and that's probably because Erigon's been built from the ground up as an archive and data storage node. I think, we would see no necessity to change, actually, because effectively as long as there are providers who are prepared to store the data, I think Erigon will always exist as a full archive node. I mean, I think what you begin to see is a differentiation of node type in a way that, you know, we're having a conversation earlier about what do you call the nodes. I mean, I think part of the problem is nodes are not just one thing anymore. I think probably across the panel there's like 4 different types of nodes, and depending on what you're doing, you want to be using a different one, right? It's a little bit unfortunate that everything's got the same label as the moment, and I think from a external application developer's point of view, it's really difficult to know which one they should use, right? Because it's like the labels are. I mean, even when you're trying to work out what flags to deliver, the labels are confusing when you're building the software. So for using it, it must be really difficult.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things we agreed upon before was, you know, one of the really tough things with EIPs like this is that it's hard to break beyond kind of what people already have as preconceptions of what these things mean. And so really what this means is a full node becomes a pruned node, and an archive node becomes a shim node, so to speak. And obviously there's more nuance to it, and there's more technicalities to it that I'm, you know, high leveling right now. But at the end of the day, if we can kind of look through what we have and understand, hey, wait a second, we actually are doing a lot of these different pieces, but in a different way, and can coordinate better and not necessarily be as assuming adversarial intent, I think, because yeah, at the end of the day, we're mostly doing a lot of this stuff already, just maybe not as technically optimized as we could do if we were to have what most people want, which is at the core dev level, which is 4.4s. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And I guess assuming I'm 4.4s pilled, right? This panel was all I needed to hear. I'm ready. What can I do as a member of the community to support these efforts?
Get involved. I think so. In order for us to pull the trigger on this, we need to be sure that this data is available for everyone forever, whatever that means. And so what I want to see is a decentralized solution for this and a centralized solution for this before I can even consider, and they should be running for at least half a year until I can even consider agreeing to this proposal. And so there's the Portal Network started working on history. They have a testnet already where they provide the history. I think I don't know if they provide their own history or if they have a testnet for it, but or if they provide history for a testnet. But yeah, there's already efforts going on in this direction. You guys at Erigon, you have the BitTorrent, which is also a decentralized solution, and I think there's a bunch of centralized solutions on the way. We specified the error format, which basically chunks your blocks into 8,192 chunks. Each of blocks each, and you will just download these chunks from somewhere, and you can import them into your client, and you can get the data this way. So if you're looking to get involved, I think this is the best place. Get involved into building these solutions, both centralized and decentralized, so that we can have a reasonable amount of assurance that this data is not going to just drop off the face of the earth ever, because we need it, and there's a lot of people that need it, and we need to have a diverse set of solutions that can provide the data in order to be as resilient as possible.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark, would you like to add to that, please?
Yeah, so I think also just looking from our small-scale team perspective, we really do see and you can see that in our own code base. There's beginning to be a split between the the transactional process, if you like, that's running the consensus, and what's happening at the data level. But I think as node providers, as builders of node software, that the data output is very much secondary, and it's kind of clear, which is why the presentation earlier today with Autoscan was, that's really useful for us, because it's like it's understanding how people are just looking at the data, which really isn't necessarily our core focus. Our core focus is building clients that manage the consensus and store data. So I think in terms of community involvement, it would be good to get more visibility of what the data usage is outside of the client context. Because I think, coming back to your point about the RPC client, it's like what we really want to know is what the RPC is going to be used for, because then we can solve for that as a technical use case, rather than it being something that we don't see, therefore, because we're optimized for what we know, not necessarily what the community is doing. And I think that's where we would want community involvement, is just to help us to see, what are the options that we don't see that we need to build for, basically.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you heard it here first. Get involved if you want to be heard, and if you don't, then we're gonna be talking about these things without you. And so there's a huge opportunity to actually have an impact on one of the more important things that we're looking at when thinking about the future of nodes in this space, which is quite an exciting thing, and it's something that is not going to happen very often. So yeah, if you're ever been interested in these types of things, it's a really great opportunity for you to get involved. But then also, as someone building applications, this is your time to shine. And I think it works well into the next question for you, Mark. As someone who works on protocols, but as a user of other protocols, like from an L1 perspective, why would someone be against 4.4s? Because like you were saying, Mark, we might be a little bit kind of in our own echo chamber, but you're a perfect opportunity to wake us up.
Totally. So I think there's a couple of reasons why people might be against 4.4s. So the first one is some people believe that it's really, really important to be able to, locally re-execute and verify the blockchain. And with 4.4s, the blockchain protocol itself is not going to make that as easy to do over the P2P network. So, this is kind of like a major philosophical difference between different blockchain communities, right? In Ethereum, we kind of have always said that it is important to be able to re-execute and verify locally. This is why node software should be able to run on, like a relatively modern laptop. And you should be able to, sync the whole chain and just like verify that everything is good. So 4.4s is going to be changing this, but like Marius said, before this goes live, we will need to make sure that that data is available so that this property can be maintained. And we need to make sure that there's like guides and tooling that makes it possible. We can just like download the data from a different location if you do want to, fully re-execute and fully verify locally the entire chain. So there's that kind of aspect. And then the other aspect is based on breaking applications, right? People would be against 4.4s because they have assumptions built into their applications that depend on this historical data. And depending on how they're pulling in that data and accessing it, it could, break the application. And like I said earlier, we definitely do not want to break people's applications. We need to make sure that whatever, solutions are shipped to production are backwards compatible. That is very important because we don't want to have application developers, building on quicksand where what they're building on is kind of changing and the assumptions change over time.
Yeah, but I agree. The only thing I would like to point out is that the RPC is not as hard as like the consensus, and I think it's fine, in my opinion, to change it over time if it makes our lives 10 times easier.
even if we might break some. And it's not really breaking the applications. They need to update. They need to update. They need to think about it. And but it's not as bad of a change as, I don't know, doing something in the EVM that will really break the application with no way forward. And so, yeah, I think there's a way, but it needs coordinated effort to do this and to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important for us when we are talking about things like breaking changes to be very clear what we mean by that, the scope of that, and the impact of that, because some people might just hear that term and apply it in a more holistic way that doesn't necessarily let them see what's really going on under the hood. Totally. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I'm excited for this question because I think we can kind of get into the details of 4.4s a little bit more. But Ahmed, do you want to talk to us about when you think the best time to include 4.4s is in the roadmap?
Right. So just to continue on what my colleagues were saying, I think that it's like what you said also is that it's important to look at the scope of the EIP, not look beyond it and think that it is something that it isn't. This EIP does not mean that RPC is not going to be available or full nodes will not have the historical data. If the user chooses not to include the historical data, then he will not have it. But if he chooses to download it and import it into their node, then it will still be available for application developers to consume. So RPC is not changing in this EIP, speaking on this particular EIP, right? When we can see this EIP, as Marius said, before we make sure that all the history is going to be somewhere readily available to be downloaded or imported or peer-to-peer acquired in some way through, whether it's through the portal network, there is already efforts like he mentioned, and they do have a testnet up and running that can serve historical data of the Ethereum mainnet for pre-merge blocks. Also, there is efforts on the Geth team to export pre-merge blocks on Era 1 format archive files. There's also efforts to try to think about the Era format because it's a little bit different than Era 1 format and how we can utilize it to import post-merge blocks. There is like thoughts about where are we going to actually store this data? Is it BitTorrent? Is it Internet Archive or public goods servers? Whatever, I don't know. Is it going to be somewhere in the users who can choose, like for example, Erigon, users can choose to keep this data and serve it on the BitTorrent network. So yeah, there are multiple solutions out there. But I think it's important to actually, once we are sure that we can do this, because there are a lot of blocking things as well. So like instead of saying that, okay, we're not gonna do 4.4s until like all of the problems are solved, we can approach it in a pragmatic way where, for example, till we solve the issue of CL clients having checkpoint sync where they can checkpoint sync the deposits, then if we guarantee that the historical blocks are available, we can start pruning whatever is before the deposit contract. And that's around like 200 gigabytes of data. And once we have, for example, checkpoint sync with CLs, then we can prune whatever is pre-merge because we have Era 1 format, portal network, etc. to serve these blocks. And once we resolve the the Era format file issue, and we can actually also import these files into for post-merge blocks, then we can finally implement the literal description of the EIP, which is each client will maintain a full 1 year of block history. But it is important, like Marius said, for all the clients to do it on the same time, so we don't have these differences and one client is responsible for more than others, etc.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think that there's also a question about how long can you leave it before something like this has to happen? Because, I mean, one thing that's quite obvious dealing with clients is the cost of being a node provider gets, you know, at some point everybody's buried under the weight of history, if you like, because essentially, you know, the cost of getting started to get to a point where you're running gets harder and harder and harder, and at some point you have to make a change, because otherwise nobody's going to want to provide nodes, because it's too much in terms of the amount of resources you've got to apply, and also if you're starting this thing that's got to run and get to the tip, that gets a longer and longer process, which means that, you know, you have to be more and more determined to enter the community. So I think there's a flip side to this, which is how long can you wait until it has to happen? Because otherwise you're just barring the community to new entrants.
Yeah, that's why I think like we've been trying to push for 4.4s as much as we can in Nethermind, because we see this as a big problem, and like we are trying now to implement Era 1 format that can push us a little bit towards that. I think Geth is doing the same. Erigon already have their own solution to this problem with the BitTorrent syncing. I'm not entirely sure about Bezo, but I probably, if someone from Bezo can weigh in, you can check on the Discord, R&D Discord for Ethereum, and talk to someone from there and ask them to know more information. But like, I think all the client teams are pushing for this to happen as soon as we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, as you get more scale in the consensus, it's only going to get worse. I mean, it's kind of like, we're talking about the terabyte bit chain at the moment. I mean, the question is, at what point is a petabyte, right? And you know, in 5 years' time, are we sitting talking about, you know, we've got to deal with that much data? I mean, that's why I think you can have to deal with it sooner rather than later, because if blockchains are going to truly scale, you've got this data problem, which will, I mean, that's the point at which the blockchain becomes the equivalent of the internet, because it's dealing with internet scale data. And I think this proposal is part of that, the realization of the beginning of that journey. Because I think things like Optimism have made it possible at the execution space. Now, you know, if that works, the question is, well, what have we got to do to make the whole front to back ecosystem scale? And I think you should see this as part of that journey.
Yeah, I think it's a first step. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. So just to kind of take a step back, Marius, would love to understand from you what advice you might have for someone who's looking to take on a pretty challenging multi-year EIP, right? Where maybe not everyone is going to be very receptive, or maybe they are, but the need to coordinate with other EIPs, other editors, all the client teams. You know, I'm sure there's more than a few ideas here in the crowd that could make Ethereum, you know, way better than any of us on stage are thinking about right now. So yeah, would love to understand what advice you have for them.
Endure. Endure and find the people that care about the same problems that you're solving. It's like getting this, like you need like, in order for anything on Ethereum to like change, you need buy-in from the client teams, and you need to convince them that that this is actually a change that is needed for you or for Ethereum as a whole. And if you have a bunch of if you find a bunch of similar-minded people that all think that this is a good solution, then you're already on very far on your way there. And then yeah, just be involved in the process. It's sometimes people propose some idea on ETH Research or on the Ethereum Magicians forums, and they then just walk away. and it might be a good idea, or it might not be, but they don't follow through. They don't like find people that support this idea, that have the same idea or a similar idea. They don't iterate on the idea. They don't want to improve it. They say, okay, this is my idea, and you guys should do it. And this is not the way that it works in Ethereum. You have to be involved. You have to get involved. And it's sometimes a hard process, and it's not easy to change the network, and it should not be, because like every potential change can have an impact on the security, on the scale, on whatever, on the user experience of the network, and so we have to weigh every change against all the other changes that are proposed, and it might be that your change is, especially for like consensus altering changes, if your change is something that is like a nice to have, then it might not be scheduled over something like 4844, which is like a must in most people's minds. So yeah, I think my advice would be find other people that are interested in this change, work together. Try to iterate on it. Don't come with like the first proposal that you have on the ETH research call, on the R&D call, or core dev call, and propose it, because most of the times it's just like it's a non-starter, and we'll like you can talk for 15 minutes about it, but in the end, no one will you won't have any buy-in. So make sure that your proposal is actually solid. And then, talk to all of the stakeholders. I think especially with stuff that like 4444, which touches a lot of like external people. It's not consensus critical, right? It doesn't really touch the consensus of Ethereum, but it touches like the RPC and how people are thinking and using Ethereum, and also the assumptions that we have on Ethereum or on history retrieval, and so you need to talk to all of the stakeholders in the ecosystem, the people that will interact with your change. That would be my advice.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's
really...
Yeah,
one
please.
last thing. I often like shut down EIPs, but I'm trying to be constructive. I'm not mad at you, or I'm not trying to be an asshole, but sometimes there are like just more important things that are going on that we need. So don't take like criticism to heart. It can be quite a challenging environment, especially if you're a developer and there's like 15 different proposals that you need to evaluate, then like your evaluation can be quite short and quite strict, and so don't be discouraged by that.
Yeah, and I think this really speaks to the roots and ethos of why most of us are here, especially on stage, which is open source, right? And technical stewardship is, a responsibility and duty if you care about like the thing you're stewarding, right? And so an EIP, I would think, is a thing, an open source technical thing that must be stewarded and seen as that if you want to see it succeed, and not just be kind of a mentally stimulating exercise for the community. And yeah, it takes time. It's painful sometimes and it hurts. But you heard it here first, Marius is not an asshole. And other core devs aren't as well. And so I think not to personalize things, and instead remember that everyone is a human being here, not just the person writing the EIP, and to have that empathy and consideration for the process, and to commit to being a part of the process if you want to see it really kind of make an impact on Ethereum. That's basically it for us. I don't know if there's any final words anyone wants to add, but please, if not, yeah?
I don't have, no, I was,
Okay.
I was trying to think, but I don't.
thank you very much for coming, and I
Yeah,
hope
really
you get involved
appreciate
in the process.
Yeah, and thank you all for speaking today. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, remember, ETH Research, Ethereum Magicians, that's where you should be. And if you want to learn more from one of the authors of the proposal, check out the Ethereum Magicians Peep and Eep on 4.4s. I think that's a really good place to start and to really kind of get into some of the things we discussed here in more detail. But yeah, thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Devconnect.